I didn't know the sound had a name when I first heard it. That's important, because if I had known, if someone had told me before, I might have dismissed it as suggestion, or fear, or folklore bleeding into imagination. Knowing too early ruins the purity of terror. It gives the mind somewhere safe to land. I had nowhere to land. I was in the southern Appalachians, in a place where the forest doesn't feel wild so much as occupied. Trees there don't start apart. They lean, overlap, share shadow. The light arrives late and leaves early, filtered through layers of green that feel intentional, almost architectural. This wasn't a camping trip. It wasn't a thrill-seeking expedition. I was there because my grandmother was dying. Not suddenly, not dramatically. Slowly, the kind of dying that stretches time until days lose their shape and nights become watchful rituals. She had been raised near the koala boundary, Cherokee land that still remembers what it was before maps tried to simplify it. She didn't speak much about where she came from, but when illness hollowed her voice, old words began slipping through. Names, warnings, half-finished sentences. I came because no one else could. I came because the house felt wrong without someone awake. The sound came on the third night. It wasn't loud. That's another thing people get wrong. It wasn't a scream or a cry or anything cinematic. It was a laugh, thin, broken, almost playful, like someone trying to remember how laughter works. It drifted through the trees behind the house, never close, never farther. Just present enough to be noticed, just distant enough to feel intentional. I froze in the kitchen, one hand resting on the back of a chair, listening. The laugh came again, same pitch, same rhythm, not human, but worse, it was attempting human. I told myself what everyone tells themselves first, an animal, an echo, a bird mimicking sound. But animals don't pace their noise, and echoes don't adjust. This laugh waited, as if listening back. I checked on my grandmother. She was asleep, breathing shallowly, her chest lifting like it wasn't fully committed to the task anymore. The room smelled faintly of cedar and medicine. When I turned back toward the window, the sound stopped. Not faded, stopped. That's when I felt this shift, that subtle presence, change you feel before a storm, or before someone enters a room behind you. I didn't look outside. Instinct stopped me. Whatever that was, I didn't want to be seen yet. It wanted to be heard. The next morning I mentioned it to no one, not because I was afraid of something foolish, but because saying it aloud felt like acknowledging a contract I hadn't read yet. My grandmother woke briefly around noon, her eyes focused on me longer than they had in days. "You hear it?" she asked. Her voice was rough, scraped thin by time. I didn't answer. She smiled, not kindly. "That's bad," she whispered. "Means it's listening now." I asked her what she meant. She turned her face away. In Cherokee belief, names carry weight. To speak something's name is to shorten the distance between you and it. My grandmother knew that even as her memory unraveled. She didn't say raven mocker. She didn't have to. That afternoon I walked the perimeter of the property, not searching, more like taking inventory. The trees closest to the house were older than they looked. Their bark split and layered like scar tissue. Ravens perched in unusual numbers along the ridge, watching without fear. They didn't caw, they just watched. I remembered something my grandmother used to say when I was a child, whenever a bird lingered too long near the house. "Some things borrow feathers," she'd mutter. At the time I thought it was poetry. Not now. Standing there, I felt watched in a way that wasn't visual, like someone was tracing the outline of my life, counting. That night, the laugh returned, closer, not by distance, but by clarity. I could hear the breathe between the sounds now, the slight catch in the throat, the imperfect timing it was practicing, learning, mocking. That's when I understood the worst part. The sound wasn't meant to scare me, it was meant to mirror me, because the raven mocker doesn't come for the healthy, it comes for the dying, and sometimes for the ones who stay too close. The second night after my grandmother spoke, I stopped pretending the sound was accidental. Once you stop pretending, the world changes its posture around you. Things don't get louder, they get clearer. Meaning sharpens. Silence becomes intentional. The laugh returned just after midnight. Not outside this time, above. It came from the upper branches of the trees, high enough that whatever made it did want to be mistaken for something ground-bound. Ravens roost high for a reason. Height gives distance, distance gives control. I stood at the front of the stairs, listening. The sound didn't echo the way a bird call should. It traveled sideways, sliding through the forest rather than bouncing off it. Every repetition felt adjusted, tuned, as if the sound itself were correcting previous mistakes. Mocking. That word settled in my chest with weight. I remembered stories my grandmother used to half tell when I was younger, always stopping before the important part, always ending with, "Some things don't like being finished." Back then I thought she meant people. Now I understood she meant lives. The raven mocker doesn't kill. That's the lie most people repeat because it's easier to digest. It steals time. It feeds on the final breaths of the dying, stretching its own existence by consuming the moments others are meant to have. Each stolen breath adds years. Each life unfinished becomes fuel. That's why it mimics laughter, not joy, completion. I didn't know all of this yet, not consciously, but knowledge doesn't always arrive as information. Sometimes it arrives as pressure, as dread with direction. I went back into the kitchen and found my grandmother sitting upright in her bed, eyes open. She shouldn't have been able to sit up. Her body had been failing for weeks. Yet there she was, alert in a way she hadn't been since I arrived. "It's closed," she said. I asked how. She knew. She touched her chest just above the heart. "Feels like someone counting my breaths," she said, "like they don't want me to waste them." That sentence hollowed the room. I asked her again what it was. She looked at me for a long time, long enough that I wondered if she was mirroring whether I could carry the knowledge without dropping it. Finally, she said, "It's not a thing. It's a hunger that learned how to walk." She told me then, slowly, carefully, like someone handing over a blade, that the raven mocker was once human, not a single person, but a practice, a path. In older Cherokee belief, witches weren't born, they were made through choices that traded morality for longevity. The raven mocker was the final form of that trade, a being that had given up everything recognizably human except desire, the desire to continue, to remain, to outlast. It wore feathers because feathers symbolized transition between sky and land, life and death. Ravens weren't evil, they were messengers, witnesses. The raven mocker corrupted that role. It didn't announce death, it arrived to harvest it. "You don't see it," my grandmother whispered. "You hear it laughing because it's pleased. Means someone there is almost done." I asked if it was there for her. She didn't answer directly. Instead, she said, "It won't take me if I don't give it my fear." Fear is an offering. That's another thing stories leave out. Not because fear feeds it, but because fear loosens time, makes people rush, makes them fracture their final moments into panic and regret. The raven mocker prefers clean endings. I stayed awake that night, not vigil style, not heroic. I stayed awake because sleeping felt like consent. The laugh circled the house slowly, never repeating the same path twice. Sometimes it came from the trees, sometimes from the roofline, once from the direction of the old cemetery down the road. That one lasted longer. I realized then that it wasn't waiting for my grandmother to die. It was evaluating her, assessing whether her death would be clean enough to take. That's when anger replaced fear, not at the thing itself, but at the idea that someone could grade a life's ending. I went outside. I don't recommend that, but I did. The air felt thick as if sound had made. Ravens sat in the trees without moving, heads tilted at identical angles. Their eyes reflected no light. I didn't speak. I didn't challenge. I simply stood there, refusing to look away from the dark. The laugh stopped. Again, not faded, stopped. And for the first time, something else happened. I felt noticed, not seen, not targeted, noted, as if my presence had altered a calculation. The raven mocker doesn't fight, it doesn't threaten, it observes, because time, once stolen, cannot be rushed. I went back inside shaken, not from cold, but from the understanding that whatever was out there knew I was willing to interfere. And interference is rare. Most people look away. Most people surrender their dying to silence and paperwork and machines. Few stay close enough to matter. That night, my grandmother slept peacefully. No labored breaths, no gasping. Almost protected. But protection draws attention, and attention is the raven mocker's language. I learned that as dawn broke and the ravens finally lifted from the trees, all at once, leaving the forest suddenly empty, as if something had moved on to its next consideration. The laugh didn't return that morning, but absence can be louder than sound, especially when you know something is deciding whether you are worth waiting for. By the third day, time inside the house stopped behaving like time. Minutes stretched, hours folded in on themselves. I would sit beside my grandmother's bed thinking only a few moments had passed, only to realize the sun had shifted completely. Shadows crawling up the walls like they were reclaiming territory. She was weaker again. The alertness from the previous night had drained out of her, leaving behind a fragile calm that frightened me more than pain would have. Pain means the body is still arguing. Calm means it has started negotiating. She asked me to open the windows, all of them. She said, "Let the air move." I did. The forest responded immediately. Leaves stirred without wind. The smell of damp earth and old bark filled the rooms, carrying something beneath it. Iron and smoke, faint but unmistakable. She watched me carefully as I moved. "You stood outside last night," she said. It wasn't a question. I asked how she knew. She smiled thinly. "It doesn't like being interrupted. Makes noise when someone interferes." I sat beside her, suddenly unsure whether staying had been an act of courage or mistake I'd already committed to finishing. She asked me if I had heard anything new. I told her no. That was a lie, because something had changed. The laugh was gone, but in its place was a feeling I can only describe as anticipation. Like the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for a signal I couldn't hear. She reached for my hand. Her grip was colder than it should have been. "You need to understand something," she said. "It doesn't come just because someone is dying. Lots of people die, every minute." I nodded. "It comes when death is noticed," she continued. "When it's watched, when someone stays close enough to care how it happens." That landed hard. Hospitals, she explained, are terrible feeding grounds, not because they lack death, but because they fracture it. Machines interrupt the natural pacing. People leave the room, final moments are rushed, postponed, negotiated by strangers. But houses like this, old houses, quiet houses, watched houses, those are different. This was a clean place to die, and cleanliness attracts collectors. I asked her why it hadn't come sooner, then why now? Her eyes moved to the window. "Because you're here," she said. That was the moment I realized this wasn't only about her. The raven mocker doesn't just feed on death. It feeds on inheritance, on the transfer between generations. on the moment when one life hands its remaining weight to another. That moment is dense, rich, full of unspent memory, and I was standing directly in it. She told me something then she had never told anyone, not my mother, not her sister, not the elders she grew up around. Her grandmother had died the same way: quiet house, close watcher, ravens in the trees. Back then, the family knew what to do. They sang low, constant, no gaps. Sound breaks attention. Singing confuses the count. But that knowledge had been set aside with other things people decided they no longer needed. We stopped doing it, she said, and things started waiting longer. That's the depth. Not that the raven mocker exists, but that we forgot how to interrupt it. The afternoon passed uneasily. I noticed marks on the window frames, scratches I hadn't seen before, thin and shallow, as if something with claws had tested the wood lightly, more curious than violent. Ravens returned near sunset, more than before. They didn't perch randomly. They arranged themselves in lines along the treetops, like punctuation. I remembered what my grandmother had said. It's listening now. That night the laugh returned, but only once. Short, satisfied, then silence. My grandmother woke suddenly, gasping, not for fear, but for time. Her breaths came fast, panicked, like someone trying to outrun a clock they could hear ticking louder than the second. I held her hand and told her to slow down. She shook her head. It's closer, she whispered. It's measuring how much is left. I didn't know what to do. Instinct told me to fight. But fight what? You can't swing at hunger. You can't threaten patience. Then she said something I didn't expect. You're going to hear it sound like someone you love. That's when fear finally arrived in its purest form. Because imitation isn't disguise, it's invitation. The raven mocker doesn't pretend to be strangers. It borrows familiarity to shorten distance. She told me if I heard my name spoken outside, especially in her voice, I was not to answer. Not verbally, not mentally, not emotionally. Attention is how it crosses thresholds. I promised. I don't know if I meant it. Near midnight, I heard footsteps on the porch. Slow, careful. Then a voice. Her voice. Calling my name. Soft, weak, like she needed help. It came from outside, behind the door. I felt my body respond before my mind could stop it. Every instinct screamed to go to her, to help, to open the door and bring her back inside. But she was already inside, asleep, breathing shallowly. The voice came again, closer, more accurate. That's when I understood something terrible. It wasn't copying her. It was practicing becoming the one left behind, testing how easily I would follow. I stood perfectly still. The voice stopped. Then came the laugh, right outside the door, satisfied. I didn't need me yet. It was content, knowing I was reachable. And that's the real terror of the raven mocker. Not that it takes the dying, but that it prepares the living. Morning came thin and gray, like it wasn't sure it belonged there. Fog pressed low against the ground, curling around the trees and the edges of the house as if trying to find a way in without asking. Ravens were already awake. I could hear them shifting in the branches, feathers brushing feathers, a quiet communal movement that felt coordinated. My grandmother was still alive. That fact alone felt provisional. She slept longer than usual, and when she woke, she didn't ask for water. She didn't ask for medicine. She asked me to sit closer. Listen carefully, she said, because I won't have time to repeat this. Her eyes were clear in a way that frightened me. The clarity of someone whose mind has already stepped closer to the edge than their body. There are rules, she continued, not laws. Rules. Laws punish you when you break them. Rules just let things happen. I asked her what rules she meant. She exhaled slowly, like each breath was being rationed. The raven mocker can't take what doesn't notice it, she said. That's the first rule. I thought of the laugh, the voice, the way it waited for reaction. "It needs attention," I said. She nodded. "Not belief. Attention." That distinction mattered. You don't have to believe in it for it to work. You just have to respond. She told me the second rule: it cannot cross thresholds uninvited. That surprised me. Doors, windows, lines drawn intentionally. These things mattered. Not because of superstition, but because thresholds represent choice, movement from one state to another. Crossing without permission breaks the practice. That's why it mimics voices, why it calls names, why it laughs where it can be heard but not seen. It wants you to open something. The third rule was harder. It cannot take a death that is claimed. I asked her what that meant. She reached up and touched her chest. A death claimed by someone else, witnessed, held, not abandoned. That's why the old songs existed, why families stayed awake, why people died surrounded by voices instead of machines. The raven mocker feeds on unattended endings, on deaths that feel like loose threads. I realized then why it was frustrated, why it circled, why it waited. Because I was there, because I was watching, because my grandmother was not alone. That didn't mean she was safe. It meant the thing had to work harder. She rested after that, exhausted by the effort of remembering. I went outside again, not to confront, but to observe. The forest had changed, not visually, atmospherically. It felt compressed, as if distance itself had shortened. Sounds carried too clearly. Every snap of a twig felt intentional. I followed the old path behind the house, the one that led toward the ridge. My grandmother had warned me not to wander far, but she hadn't forbidden observation. I found tracks near the tree line, not animal, not human. They were wrong in small ways, too deep for the apparent weight, uneven in pattern that suggested something unfamiliar with joints, as if whatever made them was wearing a shape rather than inhabiting it naturally. Above the tracks, black feathers littered the ground. Not fallen, placed, offerings or markers I couldn't tell. I didn't touch them. Rule or instinct, I wasn't sure. That's another thing about encounters like this. You don't know which of your reactions are learned and which are remembered. As I turned back toward the house, I heard the laugh again. Daylight did not weaken it. It came from the ridge this time, farther away but clearer than ever, stripped of distortion, confident. It wasn't mocking anyone. It was acknowledging. That's when I understood something crucial. The raven mocker wasn't only interested in my grandmother's death. It was interested in mine, eventually, not physically, narratively. Because if I learned too much, if I carried the knowledge forward incorrectly, I would become another unfinished ending, another inheritance. That's how these things propagate, not by violence, but by continuity. Back inside, my grandmother was awake again. She looked smaller. The space around her seemed larger, like she was already being edited out. "It's testing you now," she said without opening her eyes. I asked how she know. "Because it always does," she replied. "It doesn't trust witnesses. It tries to turn them into participants." She told me what to do when the voice returned. Not if, when. I would sit with her, hold her hand, speak her name repeatedly but softly, rhythmically, not in fear, not in pleading. Naming anchors presence. It prevents imitation. And if the laugh came close, inside the house, it was to sing, not a song I knew, not words, just sound, continuous, unbroken. Silence is where it edits. That night, the air inside the house grew thick again. I lit lamps in every room. Light doesn't repel it, but it fractures shadow, and shadow is where misalignment hides. Near midnight, the voice returned. Not her voice this time, mine, calling from the hallway, perfectly matched, tone, pace, even the slight hesitation I have before speaking my own name. That was worse. I nearly answered. That's the danger of self-recognition. You trust it reflexively. But my grandmother squeezed my hand. Hard. I started speaking her name over and over, slowly. The voice tried again, closer now. Then the laugh cut through it, angrier, less assumed. The lights flickered, not violently, deliberately, like blinking. And then something crossed the porch. I felt it through the floorboards, not vague, intent. The front door rattled once, just once. Testing, I did not move, I did not look. I sang, low, wordless, sustained. My grandmother joined in weakly, her voice barely audible but present. That mattered. The laugh fractured, skipped, then vanished. The ravens outside erupted into sound, beating their wings hard enough to shake the windows, and then stillness. Deep, absolute, the kind that feels earned. I didn't sleep. At dawn, my grandmother was still alive, but something had changed, not with her, with the house. It felt closed, like a chapter sealed. I knew then that the raven mocker hadn't left. It had retreated, and retreats are temporary, especially when something decides a story isn't finished yet. The retreat didn't bring relief. That's the mistake people make, thinking silence means safety. Silence is not absence, it's recognition. The house felt different after that night, not calmer, occupied, like something had been acknowledged and now respected the boundaries, but only because it was cataloging them. My grandmother slept through most of the morning. Her breath was shallow but even, like someone pacing themselves through the last stretch of a long road. I stayed beside her, afraid that movement might disrupt whatever fragile balance had been negotiated without my consent. When she finally woke, she didn't speak right away. She just looked at me, long, measured. "You sang," she said. I nodded. "That helped," she whispered. Not because it drove it away, because it confused the count. Time again. Everything came back to time. She told me something then that I hadn't expected. Not a warning, not a rule, but a confession. When my grandmother died, she said, I heard it too. I felt something tighten in my chest. I was young, she continued. Too young to understand what I was listening to. I thought it was just the woods making noise. But the elders knew. They stayed awake. They sang. They watched. I asked her why she never told anyone. Her eyes drifted toward the ceiling. Because I lived longer than I should have, she said. That sentence didn't accuse. It accounted. She explained that the raven mocker doesn't always succeed, but when it fails, it doesn't leave empty-handed. Sometimes it takes a fragment, a breath, a year, something subtle, and the person who survives carries that imbalance forward. Lives feel extended, out of sync, not cursed but stretched. I understood then why her life had unfolded the way it did, why she had outlived expectations, why death had circled her more than once and moved on. She wasn't marked, she was counted. That's the inheritance no one talks about. Survival isn't always clean. The day passed slowly, too slowly. Outside, the forest was quieter than it should have been. Birds moved without sound. Ravens watched from a distance, fewer now, but positioned deliberately, one on the right, one near the cemetery, one near the road. Triangulation. I began to feel something else. Pressure, not fear. Expectation. As if something was waiting for me to do something wrong. That's when the dead started to feel close. Not ghosts, not apparitions, presence. I noticed it first when I stepped into the hallway. The air felt dense, almost viscous, like I was moving through a memory instead of space. I smelled tobacco, my grandfather's brand, cedar smoke, used in old ceremonies, soap I hadn't smelled since childhood. I wasn't seeing the dead. I was walking through their attention. The raven mocker doesn't arrive alone. It draws watchers. The ones whose endings were incomplete. The ones whose time was altered. They don't intervene. They observe. Because whatever happens next matters to them too. That night, my grandmother asked me to open the old trunk at the foot of her bed. I hadn't noticed it before. It was heavy, worn, carved with symbols that weren't decorative. They were directional markers, not art. Inside were objects wrapped in cloth, feathers, beads, bone fragments, a small hand drum cracked with age. These were supposed to go back, she said. I never took them. Back where? She didn't answer. Instead, she handed me a raven feather, long, glossy, intact. Not all feathers are borrowed, she said. Some are returned. She told me to place it on the window sill facing the forest, an acknowledgement without invitation, a boundary without challenge. As night fell, the laugh did not return. That should have comforted me. It didn't, because something else happened. I heard breathing, not my grandmother's, not mine. Slow, patient, close enough that I could feel it more than hear it. It came from the hallway. I didn't look. I didn't move. I remembered the rules. Attention feeds. Reaction opens. The breathing stopped. Then footsteps. Bare. Measured. They stopped outside the bedroom door. I felt the pressure of presence intensify, like standing beside someone who doesn't cost a reflection. Then, softly, a voice spoke, not calling, not mocking, explaining. You're doing well, it said. That was new. Encouragement is more dangerous than threat. You're keeping her close, the voice counted. That takes effort. Most people don't bother. I said nothing. She's tired, it went on. You can hear that. You can feel it. There's no shame in letting things finish cleanly. Clean. The word again. I understood then what it wanted. Not permission to enter, but permission for me to stop. To step away. To rest. To trust the ending. That's the final temptation. Not fear. Relief. I began to sing. Low. Unbroken. My grandmother joined me again, her voice thin but steady. The pressure receded, not angrily, but dramatically, but with disappointment, like a calculation delayed. When the footsteps faded, I realized something fundamental had shifted. The raven mocker wasn't testing the house anymore. It was testing me, not to scare me, but to see whether I would abandon vigilance when exhaustion set in. That's how it wins. Not by force, by patience, by letting humans do what they always do eventually. Tire. By the sixth night, I understood why most people don't last. Staying awake is not the hard part. Staying present is. Fatigue doesn't arrive as sleepiness. It arrives as erosion, small justifications, tiny permissions, the thought that stepping away for a moment wouldn't matter, that nothing terrible would happen if you rested your eyes, that vigilance can be postponed. That's how the raven mocker works best. It doesn't rush you. It waits for you to convince yourself. My body hurt in places I didn't know could ache. My thoughts felt thick, like they had to push through something to reach coherence. Even speaking my grandmother's name began to feel mechanical, like repetition without meaning. That scared me more than any sound ever had, because naming only works if intention is still attached. My grandmother noticed. You're slipping, she said gently. I wanted to deny it. Instead, I asked her how long this would last. She considered the question carefully. Until one of us gives, she said. That answer carried no drama, just fact. I realized then that this wasn't a siege. It was a test of endurance. Not physical endurance, but narrative endurance. Could I keep the story unfinished long enough for it to lose interest? Because the raven mocker feeds no resolution. It needs an ending, any ending. Even resistance, if it collapses into despair, can become usable. That afternoon, the forest changed again. Wind returned, but wrong. It moved in pulses instead of flow, like something exhaling slowly. The ravens gathered lower this time, some landing on the roof, their weight audible through the beams. Tap, tap, tap. Not random, rhythmic, counting. I went outside briefly to clear my head, only to the porch, never beyond it. The air was cold despite the season. The trees leaned inward slightly, as if listening to something I couldn't hear. I had the overwhelming sense that if I stepped off the porch, something would adjust to meet me halfway. I did not step off. Inside, my grandmother slept fitfully, murmuring words I didn't recognize, old syllables, incomplete phrases, fragments of something ritualistic but unfinished. That's when the dreams began, not while sleeping, while awake. I would blink and see images layered over reality. The hallway stretching longer than it should, the front door opening inward without sound, a tall figure standing just beyond the light, wrapped in feathers that shifted as if alive. Each time I refocused, the images vanished. Hallucinations, I told myself. But hallucinations don't feel observant. They felt like previews. Late that night, the laugh returned but changed. It was tired, frustrated, less playful. I realized something dangerous then. I wasn't the only one being tested. The raven mocker was too, because patience only works if time remains plentiful. And time, ironically, is the one thing it cannot create. It must take it, which means delay costs it. That realization filled me with a dangerous confidence. Dangerous because confidence leads to overreach. I nearly spoke to it. I nearly challenged it. That urge to address is the final trap. You don't defeat things like this by asserting dominance. You defeat them by denying relevance. My grandmother woke suddenly and grabbed my wrist. No, she said sharply, don't. Her voice had strength again, borrowed, perhaps, but real. It wants you to think you're winning, she said. That's when people get careless. She told me the story then, the one she had been avoiding. Long ago, a man in her village had stayed awake for days, guarding his dying wife. He sang, he named, he refused to leave her side. On the seventh night, exhausted, he laughed, just once, at the absurdity of it all, at the weight, at the fear. The raven mocker laughed back, and that was enough. Not fear, not invitation, recognition. The man survived, his wife did not, but he lived wrong. Too long, outlasting his children. His body aged, but something else did not move on. People stopped visiting him. Animals avoided his house. He became a place time did not like to pass through. That's the other cost. Even resisting incorrectly can leave residue. The goal isn't to survive, it's to remain unaltered. That night, the pressure inside the house increased sharply. The lights dimmed without flickering. The air felt compressed, like standing deep underwater. The voice spoke again, neutral now, almost instructional. "You're very close," it said. "You can rest soon." I began singing before it finished the sentence, not louder, not faster, just steadier. My grandmother joined me, but her voice was fading. Each sound took more effort than the last. I realized then what the raven mocker had been waiting for, not my exhaustion, hers, because eventually the dying grow too tired to hold themselves. And when that happens, the living must decide whether to carry the weight alone. That's when staying becomes heavier than leaving, and that's when most people fail. The seventh night arrived without ceremony, no signs, no laughter, no ravens. That alone told me everything had shifted. Threats announced themselves, hunger observes quietly. My grandmother barely woke that day. When she did, it was only long enough to squeeze my hand, as if checking whether I was still anchored to this side of things. Her voice was almost gone, not hoarse, not weak, distant, like someone speaking from the other end of a long tunnel. I understood then that the raven mocker was no longer circling her. It was circling the space between us, that liminal space where vigilance transfers, where the dying release and the living inherit. I felt it when I stood up to stretch my legs and the room subtly resisted me, as if gravity had recalibrated itself around the bed, like the house wanted me to stay exactly where I was. That's when I realized the truth no one ever says plainly. The raven mocker does not arrive to steal life. It arrives to see who will carry it when life gets on. The laugh finally came back just after dusk, not outside, inside the walls, moving through them the way sound shouldn't be able to, traveling through studs and beams, slipping between rooms without crossing doorways. It wasn't loud, it didn't need to be. It had already been invited by proximity. I sang. My voice cracked for the first time. That mattered. Sound is only protection when it's unbroken. A laugh adjusted subtly, matching my rhythm as if sinking. That terrified me more than silence ever had. Then something worse happened. My grandmother stopped singing. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. Her eyes opened, and they focused not on me, but past me, toward the corner of the room. I didn't look. I knew better, but my body reacted anyway. A cold pressure spread across my shoulders, heavy and precise, like hands settling into place. The voice spoke, not mocking now, not instructional, but intimate. "She's tired," it said. "So are you." I felt something brush the back of my neck, light, feathered, deliberate. That was the moment when it realized I could feel it, not hear, not imagine. Feel. That's visibility. Once you can feel something like this, you stop being incidental. You become relevant. My grandmother whispered something then, so quietly I almost missed it. "Don't hold me," she said. That broke me, because holding is instinct. Holding is love. Holding is how we keep people here longer than they want to be. And that is exactly how the raven mocker feeds. I understood her warning too late. Love can become attachment. Attachment can become delay. Delay can become offering. I loosened my grip, not fully, just enough. The pressure on my shoulders lifted slightly. The laughter faltered, just a fraction. The raven mocker was not angry. It was recalculating. Then it showed me something, not a vision, a future, a glimpse of myself years from now, older, still alive, still carrying this night folded inside me like a debt that never matured. A man people described as hard to read, unchanged, untethered to time. A survivor and alone. That was the price, that was the offer. Survive this perfectly and become something time doesn't finish with. I realized then why the elders feared this thing more than death, because death ends stories. This thing extends them past meaning. I began singing again, not for protection, for refusal. My grandmother's breathing slowed. The room felt wider, less compressed. Something retreated, not fully, but enough. The laugh softened into something like disappointment. Then came the sound that broke everything. A raven's wings inside the house. One beat, two, three. I didn't look. I didn't have to. I knew what that meant. The raven mocker had stopped waiting. It had chosen a moment, and moments once chosen don't unchoose themselves. The wings stopped. That silence was worse than sound, because sound still belongs to the living. Silence, true silence, belongs to moments that have already decided how they will end. I felt it then. The house was no longer neutral. Walls don't move, but ownership does. The space around my grandmother's bed had tightened into something ritualistic, like an invisible circle drawn without chalk. The air felt older inside it, layered with breaths that didn't belong to this night. My grandmother's eyes were open, not unfocused, aware, peaceful in a way that terrified me. She was no longer afraid of the thing in the room. She was afraid of me interfering again. "Listen," she whispered, "not with your ears." I closed my eyes. That was a mistake. Immediately, I felt it. Movement without direction, like something pacing around the idea of me rather than my body. Feathers brushed my thoughts, not memories, intentions. The raven mocker doesn't need a form once it's close enough. Form is for distance. Up close, it becomes function. You stayed longer than most, the voice said. Not from anywhere, but from the space between sounds. That matters. I did not respond. Witnessing is a kind of hunger, it continued. You wanted to see this through. That sentence struck too close to truth because it was right. Part of me did want to see how it ended, and that curiosity was dangerous. My grandmother squeezed my hand weakly. No more stories, she said. Just now. I understood what she meant. Narration gives shape gives access. I stopped explaining the moment to myself. I stopped labeling, stopped counting breeds, stopped listening for meaning. I simply was. The raven walker reacted immediately. The pressure intensified, not violently, but insistently, like something leaning closer when ignored. You can carry this, it said. You already are. I felt images press against me again, not futures this time, but pasts. Other rooms, other beds, other watchers who had stayed too long or loved too hard or feared too deeply. I felt the weight of years not lived by me, compressed, dense, dense, waiting for a place to settle. That's what it wanted, not my grandmother's death, but a container. Something living, attentive, unresolved. Something like me. I realized then why some people survive these encounters and are never the same. They don't escape, they accept, and acceptance feels like peace. I began humming, not singing, not sound meant to be heard, just vibration inside my chest. My grandmother joined me, not vocally, but with breath. Our rhythms aligned, not perfectly, but enough. That mattered. The raven mocker hesitated. For the first time since I'd arrived, I felt uncertainty from it, not fear. Misalignment. This wasn't the ending it had calculated. You don't want to hold her, it said softly. Then let her go. That was the trap. Letting go is not the same as abandonment, but the difference is subtle, and exhaustion blurs it. I leaned close to my grandmother and spoke her name once, not rhythmically, not repetitively, just once, clean, claimed. Her breath slowed, then paused, then came again, lighter, like someone practicing leaving. The house shifted, the pressure eased slightly, and then a sound like feathers falling, not flapping, not beating, just drifting. The raven walker was withdrawing something, not retreating, collecting, taking what it could without confrontation. I felt something lift from the room, something heavy, patient, ancient, and move toward the forest again. Not gone, just postponed. My grandmother opened her eyes one last time. She looked only at me. Don't keep this, she whispered. Then she slept. Deep, real, not the fragile half sleep from before. I stayed there through the night. No laughter came, no voice, no wings, only the slow return of normal sound. The house settling, the wind outside, distant birds waking without urgency. At dawn, she was still breathing, but I knew the raven mocker had not taken her yet. It had released her, which meant the depth was not settled, only deferred, and deferred things don't disappear. They wait, usually for the person who noticed them most. Morning did not cleanse the house. That's a lie people tell themselves because daylight feels like authority, as if the sun carries jurisdiction over what the dark is allowed to do. But nothing left with the night. It only rearranged itself. I knew this the moment I stepped outside. The air had changed, not colder, not warmer, thinner, like something had been peeled away from it. The yard looked the same, but it felt as though it had been used, walked through too many times by something that didn't leave footprints. I stood on the porch longer than necessary, keys in my hand, listening. Birds chirped, real ones, normal ones. But underneath that was another rhythm. Not wings, not breath, attention. I locked the door behind me and the sound of it echoed wrong, too sharp, too final. Houses know when something important has happened inside them. They don't forget. They store it in walls, in corners, in the soft places sound collects. I drove away feeling like I was leaving something unfinished. That was my first mistake. You never leave unfinished things behind when dealing with beings that specialize in returning. The road out of the mountains curved tightly, wrapped in trees that leaned inward like listeners. I had driven it dozens of times before, but this time it felt narrower, as if it had decided to remember me. Halfway down, I saw a raven on the guardrail. Not unusual, except it didn't move as I approached. It didn't fly. It didn't even turn his head. It just watched me pass, eye fixed, unblinking. And I knew that it wasn't following the car. It was marking direction. I didn't slow down. I didn't look back. But my chest tightened with the realization that something had come with me from the house. Not physically, not spiritually, contextually. The raven mocker doesn't attach itself the way parasites do. It embeds into itself into sequences, moments that logically lead to other moments. And I was now part of a sequence it recognized. I didn't tell anyone what happened, not because I was afraid they won't believe me, but because belief is a form of invitation. And I wasn't sure who would answer. Days passed. My grandmother remained stable, quiet, sleeping more than walking, but present. The doctors called it a plateau, a temporary holding pattern. They don't know how accurate that word is. At night, I began to hear it again. Not laughter, not yet. Just the sound of movement where movement shouldn't be. A flutter behind walls, a rustle in empty hallways. Once, late, too late, I heard footsteps outside my apartment door, measured, slow, as if counting something. I didn't open it. I sat on the floor, back against the door, heart pounding, and waited for whatever was there to decide what it wanted. Eventually, it left, but the feeling didn't. That's how you know the difference between an intruder and a presence. Intruders take, presences alter. The dreams started after that, not nightmares, not exactly. They were memories, but not mine. I saw hospital rooms from decades ago, old beds, different walls, people breathing, their last breaths with something watching quietly nearby, always, always unseen. I never saw the raven mocker directly. I didn't need to. I felt its position. It stood just outside the circle of awareness, patient, observing how humans hold on, how they bargain with time, how they cling to names and faces as if those things weigh anything against inevitability. I woke each time feeling older, heavier, as if some invisible ledger had added another line under my name. I finally broke my silence with my aunt. She had stayed on the land longer than anyone else, knew the old stories, respected them without dramatizing them. When I told her about the night, carefully, without embellishment, she didn't interrupt, didn't ask questions, didn't correct me. When I finished, she nodded once. "I noticed you," she said. That was all. Not you saw it, not it visited, not you imagined. It noticed you. I asked what that meant. She looked at me for a long time before answering. "It means you stood where others turned away, and now it knows how you listen." That word again, listen. "You can't outrun something that doesn't chase," she continued, "and you can't fight something that doesn't attack. All you can do is decide what it gets from you." I asked her how. She shook her head. "You already started," she said, "by not speaking its name, by not repeating its laughter, by not making it a story for people who don't respect stories." Then she touched my arm. "But you can't carry this alone forever. Witnessing has a cost." I asked her what happens when the cost comes due. She didn't answer immediately. Outside, a raven called, just once, clear, sharp, Then silence. "It comes back," she said quietly. "Not for death, for balance." That night I stood by my window and watched the tree line. I felt watched back, not aggressively, not hungrily, like an accountant checking figures, evaluating, waiting for something to tip. I realized then the truth I had been avoiding. The raven mocker had not left my grandmother because I interfered. It left because something else had entered the equation: me. And now, whether I liked it or not, I was part of the folklore, not as a victim, not as a hero, but as a continuation. These stories don't end, they migrate. They move from place to place, person to person, era to era, carried by those who listen too well and live too long with unanswered moments. The laughter never came that night, but just before sleep took me, I heard wings, far away, circling, learning the shape of my life. Inheritance is usually spoken about in terms of objects: land, jewelry, houses, names, but some inheritances don't belong to families, they belong to attention. I understood this the first night I returned to the land alone. No illness, no vigil, no reason that could be explained politely, just a pull. The kind that doesn't tug at your body but rearranges your priorities until resistance feels irrational. The house was empty when I arrived. My grandmother had been moved to a care facility closer to town. Doctors called it precautionary. I knew better. The land had loosened its hold on her, which meant it was tightening its hold elsewhere. I unlocked the door and stepped inside and immediately felt the difference. It wasn't hostile, it was alert, as if the house itself had been waiting for someone to return and was now relieved the wait had meaning. Dust hung in the air, unmoving. The silence was structured, walls holding their breath, floorboards attentive. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't need to. The dark recognized me. That was when I felt it. The subtle shift behind my eyes. Not pain, not pressure, just a recalibration, like a lens adjusting. I could sense where the space felt thin, near the back room, near the window that faced the trees, near the place where my grandmother's bed had been. I avoided none of it. Avoidance teaches things where your fear lives. Instead, I walked the house slowly, deliberately, letting my presence announce itself without challenge. "I am here," I said, not to the house, not to the forest, not to anything specific, just truth, spoken plainly. The air responded, not with sound, but with weight. Something acknowledged the statement. That night I didn't dream. I remembered, not my memories, patterns, the way certain moments line up over generations, the way people who live near death long enough to develop the same pauses in their speech, the same careful listening habits, the same reluctance to explain. I realized then that the raven mockers does not choose randomly. It observes bloodlines, yes, but more importantly, it observes temperament. It returns to those who resist denial, those who don't rush to label, those who stay. My grandmother hadn't been special because she was old. She was special because she never looked away. And now, without ceremony, without consent, that role was drifting toward me. I noticed changes in myself over the flowing weeks. Subtle things. I could tell that when a room had recently held grief, even after it had been aired out, cleaned, repurposed. Hospitals felt louder to me, not with noise, but with unfinished conversations. I began waking moments before my phone rang, knowing who it would be before I answered. I stopped being surprised by bad news, not because I expected it, but because I could feel when time was tightening around someone. This is not power, it's erosion, a wearing down of the distance between knowing and not wanting to know. And erosion always leaves something exposed. The laughter returned one evening while I was driving, not close, not mocking, distant, that didn't touch the trees. I didn't react, didn't tense, didn't accelerate. I simply acknowledged it internally. I hear you, and kept my eyes on the road. The sound faded. That's when I understood the rule. The raven walker feeds on urgency. Fear is useful, yes, but panic is nourishment. Calm starves it, not completely, but enough to slow the cycle. Still, slowing is not stopping, and nothing ancient ever accepts delay without collecting interest. My aunt visited me shortly after. She looked tired in the way people do when they've known something would happen long before it did. You feel it now, she said, not asking. I nodded. She sat heavily, hands folded. It's not a gift, she said, and it's not a curse. It's a responsibility people didn't ask for but sometimes earn. I asked her how long she'd known. Since the night you didn't leave, she replied. Most people leave. I asked her why no one warned me. She smiled sadly. You can't warn someone into this. They have to notice on their own. Otherwise, they don't survive it. That word again, survive. I asked what survival looked like. She considered this carefully. Boundaries, she said. You don't follow it. You don't speak for it. You don't romanticize it. And you don't pretend it's yours. I asked what happens if I fail. Her eyes darkened, not with fear, but with memory. Then you become efficient, she said, and efficiency is how monsters are born. That night, alone again, I stood outside and watched the stars. The forest watched back. Somewhere beyond sight, something shifted its fate, recalculating, not angry, not threatened, just adjusting its expectations. The raven mocker had tested me and found something it could work with. I understood then what inheritance truly meant, not ownership, not destiny, but proximity. It had been brought closer enough to matter, and closeness, once established, is never accidental. There is a moment, rare, quiet, irreversible, when you realize you are no longer being observed. You are being consulted. I didn't recognize that moment at first. It came distinguished as normalcy. A phone call, a neighbor's dog barking too long, the mundane scaffolding of everyday life doing its best to pretend nothing fundamental had shifted. But something had. I noticed it the day a stranger stopped me outside a grocery store. He didn't look strange, that's important. No wild eyes, no dramatic pauses. Just an ordinary man with tired shoulders and a face shaped by disappointment rather than fear. You hear things, don't you? He asked. Not do you believe, not have you seen, you hear things. The question slid into me like it already belonged there. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He nodded once, like I'd confirmed something. My wife's been sick, he said. Doctors don't know why. She talks to someone at night, laughs sometimes, not happy laughs, like someone's correcting her. My chest tightened, not with panic, but with recognition. This was new. The raven mocker wasn't just near me anymore. It was routing through me. I told the man I was sorry, that I didn't know how to help. That part was true. But as I walked away, I felt it, the subtle pressure behind my sternum, the familiar weight of attention, not accusation, expectation. That night, the laughter returned, closer than ever, not mocking, conversational, like someone amused by how long it took me to understand my role. It came to me fully in a dream, but not symbolically, not metaphors, no disguises, just presence. The raven mocker did not appear as a bird or a beast. It appeared as absence shaped like intelligence. Where it stood, the dream bent around it, sounded thinned, color drained. You resist ownership, it said. Good. Its voice wasn't cruel. It wasn't kind either. It was accurate. You resist worship. Better. I try to speak. The dream won't let me. You resist explanation, it continued. That is why you remain inefficient. The word landed hard. Efficient. I understood now why my aunt had feared it. Efficiency means shortcuts, patterns optimized, deaths harvested without friction. You don't want to become that, the Raven Mocker said, and yet you stand where such people stand. I felt something tighten, anger maybe, or resolve. I won't serve you, I said, not aloud but clearly. It considered this. I am not served, it replied. I am allowed. That distinction mattered. You extend time, it went on. You slow endings, you complicate exits. This irritates forces far less patient than I. That surprised me. There are others? I asked. A pause, then careful truth. There are always others. The dream ended with conclusion, no threat, no promise, just awareness settling deeper into my bones. The changes accelerated after that. People lingered around me longer than necessary. Conversations drifted toward illness, regret, unfinished business. Strangers confided things they hadn't planned to say, not because I invited it, but something about me now listened without hunger. I began to understand the danger. The Raven Mocker wasn't turning me into a harbinger of death. It was positioning me as a buffer, a delay, a negotiator. And negotiation, when repeated too often, becomes precedent. It was teaching death that it could be questioned, that I could be slowed, that someone might speak back. That kind of defiance doesn't go unnoticed. My grandmother died on a Thursday, not dramatically, not violently. She exhaled and didn't inhale again. I felt it before the call came, felt the line snap, clean, final. But there was no laughter, no wings, no presence in the room, just absence doing what absence does best. Later, alone, I stood outside and waited. I didn't call, I didn't challenge, I didn't bargain. Eventually, the pressure came, not heavy, respectful. You kept your distance, the Raven Mocker said. I did, I replied. You complicated the sequence. I had to, another pause. You will be remembered, it said, not as praise, not as threat, as fact. I felt it withdraw, not entirely, but enough, like something stepping back into the trees, satisfied, for now. That's when I understood the final truth. The most dangerous thing about beings like the Raven Mocker is not what they take, it's what they teach you to carry: patience, attention, and the terrible understanding that death is not an ending, but a process that adapts when resisted. I had spoken back, and death had listened. Stories don't end when they conclude, they end when they no longer need witnesses. I learned that years later, long after the house had been sold, the land returned to quiet ownership, my grandmother's name spoken less often but with more care. Time did what time always does. It softened edges, dulled urgency, made the impossible feel distant enough to survive. But distance is not the same as separation. Some nights, usually when the air feels wrong before storms, I sense it again. Not presence, not pursuit, just acknowledgement. Like a shadow passing through memory rather than space. The Raven Mocker never returned to me the way people expect monsters to return. No final confrontation, no dramatic reckoning, no punishment. That's the mistake modern fear makes. It expects closure. Ancient things don't close loops, they leave doors unlocked. I did not become a storyteller in the public sense. I didn't document, didn't record, didn't warn. Warnings create seekers, seekers create patterns, patterns create invitations. Instead, I lived carefully, not cautiously, carefully. I learned when to stay quiet in hospital rooms, when to step outside, when to let grief finish its sentence without interruption. I learned the difference between holding and holding space, That difference saves lives. Sometimes. Other times it simply makes death less lonely, and that matters more than people admit. Once, years after everything, a child asked me why ravens gather near old places. He wasn't afraid, just curious. I told him the truth without mythology. Some things watch to remember, I said. Some things remember so they don't have to return. He nodded, satisfied. That told me enough. The raven mocker does not hunt the fearful, it hunts the unattended, the forgotten, the moments where death becomes sloppy because no one is listening. That is its nature, not evil, no mercy, balance sharpened by time. I don't feel chosen. I don't feel cursed. I feel placed, like a stone set quietly in a river, not to stop the flow, but to change how the water moves around it. That is the role people misunderstand. You don't defeat folklore, you participate responsibly. You don't banish it, you outgrow the need to explain it. And when you do that, when you stop demanding it perform terror on cue, it loosens its grip. Not gone, never gone, just less interested. Sometimes, very rarely, I hear laughter far away, fainter than memory, dry as leaves brushing stone. It never comes closer, and I never answer, because I understand now that the raven mocker taught me without meaning to. Death listens, but it respects silence more than fear. And the oldest stories survive not because they are retold, but because someone, somewhere, knew when to stop speaking and simply stand present at the edge of things. This is not a warning. This is not a lesson. This is a record of proximity. And now that you've heard it, the story doesn't belong to me anymore. It belongs to the quiet space you felt with while listening. That space is where folklore lives and where it waits.